Welcome back to Sullivan Street, where we will again talk about our favorite band, and probably yours too if you're listening to the podcast, Counting Crows. Today we're going to talk about arguably one of the, most famous or infamous legendary demo tapes of any band, at least from what I've heard, in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Chris, we're going to talk about the flying demos. What do you
We're
think?
going to go all the way back to the beginning. And I
Yeah.
will, as opposed to what Eric said, I do want to welcome anyone who's maybe Counting Crows is your second favorite band,
Or
or your third or
third.
your fourth. Maybe you're still willing to listen to us. We accept all, Eric, even if they're, bless them, even if they're like your fifth or sixth. Although I don't really understand those people.
We will,
So,
yes, we will
you know,
accept that. We've been actually talking about doing the flying demos since like the fifth episode. I mean, at least off the mic, and we're looking for a good time, no pun intended, of when to do it. And after talking to Amy, I guess we thought, hey, this is time to get into unearth things and how the band started, the history.
yeah, it feels like the conversation again, especially around because of the documentary. I feel like it's the right time to talk about it in the context. Adam's talked a little bit about some of these older songs in recent interviews, the discussion in the documentary.
Yeah,
Let's go all the way back, Eric.
And he's talked about for whatever reason, he's talked about the demos quite a bit or the process of giving it to the record execs, et cetera, over the last 5 years. Joining us on the podcast, if we're going all the way back, of course, we have to bring our historian, Geoff Harkness. Geoff, thanks again for joining us. All right, any quick hits about the flying demos? You're excited?
Oh yeah, I mean I think that they're quite interesting. Especially because you have some of the songs that are obviously fundamental to August and everything after, but then you have this other set of songs that wasn't used, and then also you have the band's biggest hit, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, I think it's going to be fun to kind of dig into this and see what we can figure out. I'm excited.
All right, cool. And welcoming also to the podcast today, first time, is the man that goes as Double G. We will say hi to him. And the why did we bring him on today? Well, we have the Counting Crows historian. I would call this Double G the Counting Crows archaeologist, I guess, because he is going back trying to unearth little gems, little nuggets, little historical treasures that maybe haven't been here otherwise. Double G, welcome to the podcast.
I like the Counting Crows archaeologist. I like that. It's a good one.
I think we like to have little titles like that. So we know you're a bit of an expert, or at least know a lot about the flying demos. Do you want to talk about how and when you first got into Counting Crows?
Yeah, I mean it's not really a interesting story. I'm 40 years old, and it was, I guess in my youth, my younger days, teenage days, I heard them, I liked them, and I quickly discovered that it was my favorite band. And then, you start going on the internet and finding out that they have, the stuff that they didn't put on the albums, and I was like, oh wow, this is fascinating. So that kind of, I kind of got really interested from there and becoming an archaeologist, I suppose. But yeah, no, the origin story, like many other people heard them. I said, no, these guys are really good.
Do you remember the first song you heard from them? Or
no.
Okay. What was the first album you had of theirs? Do you know that? Was it Recovering?
The first one that I bought myself, it's got to be Desert Life.
Okay.
That's my favorite album ever. So.
Okay, good to know your favorite album. Yeah, that was probably, in some ways that was the album that maybe the most of that more than any other fans wrote us and said, oh, we want to be on that podcast, we love this Desert Life. And we've already said it's also a band favorite as well. So let's get into the history. Geoff, you don't have to mention everything that you know, because save some details for the book, right? You still want those people buying the Rain King book by Geoff Harkness. Awesome book. But Geoff, why don't you tell us about this creation of this legendary, again, I'll just give the 2-second Cliff Note version that Adam says, right, that demo tapes even back then were, I don't know, 2 to 4 songs usually that you would send to somebody, because some execs would just listen to 10 seconds of one song, right, and decide whether they want to listen to more. And he said he sent this 13, and every major record exec wanted it, and that's when the bidding war started or whatever. So Geoff, let's go to you.
Yeah, well, it is true that usually a band will have a demo tape with maybe 2 or 3 songs. Adam said because if you put more than that, you reveal that you have songs that aren't good. So he's like, they hold back as much as possible because they don't want to tip to the fact that they have filler songs or songs that aren't that good. He said in their case, they kind of had the opposite problem, that they had so many good songs that basically it was like showing the record companies what a strong writing unit they had. The sessions were put together at Dancing Dog, which is of course Dave Bryson's studio. And as I recall, Adam said there were sort of 3 big chunks that they were recorded in. When he was putting together these songs, of course, he was working as a duo with Dave Bryson. He was working in the Himalayas. He was singing backup with Sordid Humor and kind of a musician about town. But he was slowly putting together these demos and bringing in musicians he was fond of. And so, he worked with Bryson, of course. Bryson had worked with Matt Malley in Mr. Dog, a band of theirs. And so, hey, let's bring in this guy. Everybody loved Charlie, so they brought him in. Slowly, he kind of assembles this team and says, this is kind of a great studio band. And they record these songs in these sort of large chunks. And of course, because it's a professionally produced demo in a 16-track studio, it doesn't sound rough and like a demo. It sounds like a polished, almost an album. And so it's very impressive sounding as well. Adam said it actually didn't take them that long once they started passing this demo out to get a lot of interest from labels. It was really just a matter of months. Eventually, they had kind of a couple of showcases, and at those gigs, all the record companies showed up. They eventually got 9 offers from major labels and were able to kind of set the terms and go forward. Gary Gersh, the A&R guy at Geffen, who was really interested in them, later became the manager, said that he had listened to it just over and over again. He loved the demo, but he also felt like, he said, you guys have made a demo that sounds like an album. Now we're going to make an album that sounds like a demo. He thought that it needed to be more organic, a little less slick. And this is where T-Bone Burnett comes in and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that. I mean, I know that there's more history. I think one thing, and we kind of know this, but 5 of the 11 August songs were on this demo. So you've got Rain King, Omaha, Anna Begins, Mr. Jones, and Round Here are all on the demo tape. Not on there then are the other 6 songs. So Perfect Blue Buildings, Time and Time Again, Sullivan Street, Ghost Train, Raining in Baltimore, and A Murder of One, not on the demo tape. So these are songs that were apparently developed during in the interim between the time they were passing the demo around and the time that they started recording the album or got into the recording of the album. So I'll leave it at that, and then we'll get into track by track. Maybe Double G wants to add a bit to it.
Yeah, let's have Chris. Chris has a follow-up
Yeah,
question.
note that notably interesting in terms of the lineup, right, is that there's 2 different drummers. Because Bowman has said that I can't think of the guy's name, something Hawkins, I think.
Toby Hawkins, yeah.
Toby Hawkins, right? I always like, my brain always remembers Taylor Hawkins, and I know that's wrong. But right, there's 2 different drummers, because Toby's on some of them, and then Jim, and then Steve Bowman.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. It wasn't clear, and again, Double G will maybe chime in. It wasn't clear who else is playing in these. I think Marty Jones gets some writing credit with some of these songs, and so I'm not even sure if Matt Malley was on these or not. Yeah, that wasn't entirely clear to me. And it is interesting, Geoff, what you said about the songs that are on it, because except for Murder of One, I guess I would argue, they're the ones that are on it are their most famous songs from that album. So that's pretty interesting, right? When people think of August, they usually think of, right, Rain King, Mr. Jones around here, and Anna Begins, and
Omaha, yeah.
yeah, and Omaha, right? And those are the concert staples to this day. Those are the ones that they play the most from this album. Luckily, they play a little Sullivan Street too. Double G, do you have any things to add from this historical look?
I do have a couple things to add. First of all, I don't know if you guys realize this, but the 5 songs that are on both the demo and August also happen to be the 5 songs from August on the best of Films About Ghosts. Yeah, they're 1-for-1 match. So I think early on they knew, hey man, we struck gold with these particular songs. Now, I said, I don't know if you guys hear my dog.
That's all right.
Those are the dancing dogs.
Yeah, they are dancing. Oh yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, the lineup changes. There were a couple songs at least that Marty Jones played on. I believe it was Lightning and Shallow Days were at least 2 of them. So I know that he played bass on a couple, and these dogs. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. When we're going off, you can do whatever. So, yeah.
I was going to say Lydia Holly, I believe, played organ or keyboard on a couple, or piano possibly.
And there's a couple of points where there's some female voices. I can't think of the song, but on some of the background vocals, right?
Definitely.
So clearly,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was going to ask about that too. Do we know who that is? Double G, do you know who's doing the background vocals? The women doing the background vocals of those songs?
I always assumed it was Lydia Holly, but I'm not. I couldn't tell you.
That's what I was thinking as well too, and I didn't know that. Thank you for wondering. I knew that Holly was one of the writers for some of these, as you said, but I didn't know the first name. So okay, Lydia. All right.
The other thing I'm curious about: do we know if the order of the tape that was passed around matches what has circulated, right? With Rain King going first and stuff like that. Do we know that, or are we not sure?
I've never seen a copy of the original tape itself. That was apparently, they said it was sold at shows and distributed.
And I know Double G's always looking for that copy. If you've got a copy that was sold at a show, get in contact with that man.
I have been. I tried to reach out to people on social media who claim to actually have it, and all I can find out about is that it's just a cassette tape and like a white label where they just wrote Counting Crows on it. But other than that, I can't confirm that either. Nobody has gotten back to me with all the questions.
So Double G, did you want to show them? You do have a copy of the CD version, right?
Got it right here. I don't know if you can see it.
With that legendary. Now, when did you pick that up? Do you know, or did you get it off eBay or from Record Store? Or
probably 20-something years ago.
Okay.
I think if I remember correctly, it was it's Kiss the Stone was like a bootleg purveyor in the basically Pirates in the 90s. I believe that this CD was actually published in 1996, but I'm not exactly sure about that. But
I believe they were an Italian bootleg company, because something about the Italian copyright laws were somehow permissive of this. And so there's a bunch of those bootleg companies from the 90s that made pressed nice CDs, but I believe several of them were Italian. And I think Kiss the Stone is one of them.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I just remember hearing about. I guess I wasn't a hardcore fan. As I said before, I wasn't into bootlegs or B-sides as much back then for whatever reason. Now, of course, I would be. Not just about them, about all the bands that I was into. I was just like, well, kind of like what Adam says. If it was meant to be official, it's meant to be official or something. And then I just figured they would come up at some point, or on, some of them did. But okay, I just remember that people were talking on the message boards that I wasn't on that much, but there was always these discussions about how great these songs were. So it was good for me to finally dive into them recently. Okay. Any other? Thanks for sharing that, Double G. I don't have I might have to make my own CD of that so I can act like I'm in the 90s. All right. So, but by the way, Chris, we're going to go track by track, but I was just thinking more than August, I think, and of course this was made before August, doesn't doesn't this the sound of this album and the songs itself just sound so 90s, you know, like so nostalgic to
Oh,
me. That's just me. Now maybe if you were
I think it
younger.
sounds, but I also think it sounds kind of very late 80s too.
Okay.
It's very like, but there's an interesting sound to it. And I think there's something to the idea as we go through the songs, we'll talk about it more maybe, but the idea that what the band discovers in recording August is what makes them so unique, right? That like you could have released this album, the Flying Demos, as a record, and it's a good record, right? But it would have been more, to your point, Eric, like of the time and kind of
Yes. Yeah.
generic, and sort of they were able to find this voice to build something that's timeless
Yeah.
in a way that this is of a time. You know, you can hear it in the way this is produced, and the
Yes.
sounds of it, like the drums, the gated drums, and the
Yeah.
synth, like just the way it sounds is of a time in a way that August, of course, I think sounds out of time, right? You could have made that record sort of at any time in the last 50 years, basically, and it was
Yeah.
plausible, you know?
So we'll give T-Bone and Adam credit for that. No, yeah, you made it a good point. So I liked listening to it because it made me feel nostalgic, but of the time. And you're exactly right. Where August is much more timeless, and quite frankly, a lot of their albums are timeless. So okay, let's go track by track. And it's funny you said that, Geoff, about and also Double G about the production and who was in the band and other people playing in there in the demos, because a lot of the production I found sounds like Sordid Humor, and maybe Himalaya. I didn't listen to Himalayas as much. I've kind of dug into Sordid Humor recently. I guess they only have one album, right? But it's on YouTube. It was kind of hard to find, but I've been listening to that, and you could tell some of the same people were involved, and maybe Adam, of course, he wasn't a member of Sordid Humor, right? But he helped out with them. I think he sung backup, and
Backup singer,
and he
yeah.
helped them record or was in the sessions with them or something like that. Okay, so we'll start with track one of Chris's favorite songs of all time. Of course, I love it too. Rain King. The only thing I'm going to say, and I'll let you guys talk about it more, there is some new lyrics in there, or new or old lyrics that are different, and I like those. It kind of it reminded me of, speaking of the 90s, a lot of the hardcore and lyrically explicit hip hop groups would release a radio, which they don't do now. That now they just bleep words and stuff. But a lot of them would re-record songs for radio versions of the hip hop song. So sometimes it would be like 75% the same, but then there'd be a remix of a hip hop song to be like, oh, one verse is new. I'm like, oh, that verse is kind of neat. I like the old verse. I like the new verse. That's the same feeling I had when I got into the Rain King, hearing like a new verse. So let's go with Chris. Chris, your thoughts about Rain King from the Flying Demos?
Sure. No, and it's interesting because you listen to it, right? It's relatively similar to what you get at the end, but I think it has again, there's certain sounds like the drums that sound very specific to the time period. And it's also, and you'll find this through a lot of the songs that ended up on August, there's more of a like rock sound. It's busier than the versions that you'll hear on August. We'll get to one later that I think is the biggest, most like obvious example of this, but that's, I think, the big difference is that there's a certain space in the August songs that's kind of missing here. I feel like this version sounds, when Adam says that they're influenced by like REM, this version kind of sounds a little bit more like late 80s REM than the final version does. And you can kind of hear, I think, that influence. I don't know about you, Geoff. I know you're an REM guy too.
I thought the whole collection is, you really hear when you listen to the whole set of demos, you hear that REM influence, I think, more here than you do on August. It's like, yeah, now you really hear it. And I think one of the reasons is that if you look at the songs that are on here that are on August, and then the songs that are not on here that are missing, a lot of those are like the more like melancholy, kind of slow, sad, very spacious songs that are in some ways not that reminiscent of REM. This has got, especially when you start adding in, Shallow Days and some of these peppier songs. Remember that they originally worked with Don Dixon. who was the producer of Murmur and Reckoning, the first two
Mm.
REM albums, or co-produced those two. And so obviously they were, huge fans of the band. Adams talked about that, but I think that, and Don Dixon co-wrote Time and Time Again. So, obviously they were really interested in that kind of REM-ish sound, but also to Eric's point earlier, you can hear how much they changed here too, and so it's very interesting when you can kind of A/B the tracks and hear Rain King, the demo version versus the version that made it to August. But in some ways, I think it's the songs that they wrote for August that aren't on the demo that really give it its sound, that melancholy kind of spacious, very still kind of sound that they developed. And so it's interesting. I think also just a final point is that you really hear what was there, and then also what T-Bone Burnett brought to the table and what they developed during those sessions. But what was in place before there was T-Bone Burnett, before there was a record company, what was there? And some of the things that were there that are in some ways surprising, like the great background singing. I noticed that too, that, there's a female background singer. So when they brought in Maria McKee, it wasn't like, oh yeah, this was some genius idea they came up with. I mean, they were replicating what was already here. And I think to this song, you can't leave out the fact that he does the yeah at the end,
Yeah.
The signature yeah that is still gets the applause in concert and everybody waits for it at the end. That was there too. So a lot of things that we love about Counting Crows belong to them. You can't give it all to T-Bone and the production and the record company and the development of the band. A lot of cool things that we love about them were already in place, and you hear it on these demos.
And the idea, right, that if this order that we have is the order that was sent to record companies and producers, I mean, that kind of makes sense. It's stunning to me as we will walk through this, right, how far down Mr. Jones and Round Here are on this, if that's the case. But if you put this in and you flip on and you're like, bam, Rain King, you're like, that is pretty good. I mean,
and remember that the band and the record company were convinced that Rain King was going to be the flyaway home run hit of the album, and typically you front load your albums with the biggest, best songs. So it wouldn't surprise me if when they were sending out the demos, they put that song first, because they definitely want to make sure people listen to it.
Yeah, it is funny that, especially because to this day, like we've talked about, especially in concert, Rain King is the showstopper, right? Not Mr. Jones, not Around Here. They are, but to a lesser extent. And here it is, the first track on the Flying Demos. Double G, any thoughts on Rain King?
Yeah, I mean, most notable, I think, besides the obvious differences in production and recording, I think are the lyrics. I wonder, I guess like Adam has said recently, that he doesn't usually go back and rewrite songs like once he gets it, and he's like, this is something I've never done before. But then there's songs like this, and I think like even later around the middle of their career, there was like, I think it was like American Girls, they dropped like a couple verses from the first couple versions. So Daylight Fading, so I wonder, I just don't know what caused the rewrite. Not that I think it takes anything away from the song. I think it kind of differentiates it a little bit, besides the obvious. It's like what Chris said. It's got like a late '80s sound, I think.
Oh, that's good point, Double G. He's pretty right. He's usually not into rewriting, especially lyrics, or he says, "Hey, I concentrate, I get it done." But in these cases, there is something that he either thought he could do a little better. That is interesting to do. What motivated that? Because it's not like these lyrics were bad. In fact, they're kind of fun. Okay, let's move on to Omaha, or as I call this one, the hard Omaha. Because it's almost like this is like the reverse Across a Wire, right? Where where instead of doing acoustic versions of electric songs, this sounds like, yeah, I know Omaha is not right. It sounds like a little more of an electric song, of a kind of acoustic song. I like it a lot, actually, but I understand why they went a different direction with T-Bone. I've heard people comment on Line and like YouTube, and I agree that this song, more than any others, just because of his youth, the singer doesn't sound 100% like Adam Duritz, even though it clearly is Adam Duritz. At least I remember I'm like, oh, that kind of sounds like a very, very young. And some people, I saw some people on YouTube like, oh, that track is not him. That must be one of his friends or something. Chris, let's go to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely the big difference here is the guitars versus the keys, right? In the version of Omaha that we know best, the organ and Charlie's playing is much more upfront, as opposed to here where the guitars are much more upfront. I mean, this is one that Adams talked about in other interviews about like how this was one of the hardest ones to record because he was like, we had to strip this back. Like we played Omaha in a circle for days until everyone had an emotional breakdown, basically. But you can hear it, right? That again, this is again a good example of the idea of okay, we're taking this from this rock sound of a time to this other thing that we're trying to create. Because the final version of Omaha sounds like it's totally, again, a totally different space here. That, and again, a lot of it at the base level is just you're peeling back those guitars and you're layering up those, Charlie's playing, particularly on the why can't I think of the word? Oh my god,
On the accordion?
on the accordion.
Yeah.
Yes, the thing he famously plays on this song. Yes,
exactly. So it's been a long week for all of us. Geoff, your
Mm.
thoughts on the Hard Omaha?
Yeah, and this one's on the August reissue that they did. This is one of the few that they actually put out to the public and let everybody hear. I like it too. I think again you can kind of A/B this and see how much development they had with a song like this. And I definitely prefer the studio version. I had written the same kind of note as that Chris just made about Charlie's role because we've talked before about how he's kind of like the secret musical weapon of the band in some ways and contributes so much in so many different ways on different instruments. Sometimes he's playing piano, sometimes it's accordion, sometimes it's organ, and many, sometimes it's harmonica. But Charlie is often somebody who's making a really key musical contribution. And I think that you just don't hear as much of that. Charlie's not as prominent anywhere in these demos as he becomes later and becomes like more important to the group's sound. So it's interesting to hear this early version of it. It's a very kind of Stonesy guitar sound. In some ways, it's not as reminiscent as many of the, it doesn't fit into the rest of the demos as easily, I think, because of that kind of crunchy guitar sound.
Right.
But in all cases, one of the things that comes clearly across in all the demos is how strong the songs were. And so even if we're going to reimagine them or use different instruments or restructure them or rearrange them, the songs were there from the very beginning. And so, as I said before, for all of the magic that the record label and T-Bone Burnett and the other musicians bring to the table, what was in place before anybody showed up was already pretty great. And I think this is just example number 2 of that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Geoff. There's a few spots, and I wish I made better notes, where I thought Charlie did shine, but I thought the same thing as you, dialed down a bit. I wonder if that was T-Bone saying, hey, you have this star, let it shine, and it fits the theme, or the overall sound of August. Because as you said, remember I said that to him in person I was walking by him and said he was the MVP of the band, which I kind of think he is, Charlie, of course, I've said before. So Double G, your thoughts on the Hard Omaha?
It's kind of like, to me, it's kind of like the Hard Round Here from the Himalayas. I kind of equate this as like, it's a completely different version of a great song, right? And I think on its own merit, it's like if it showed up like this on August, kind of maybe more stripped down, not as reverby, right? People would still probably like the song, but I think on August, it's so unique. It doesn't really sound like anything else. On the flying demos, it sounds really good too, in my opinion. And I've seen over the years a lot of fans have said that they prefer this version over the others a lot, like they prefer maybe the Himalayas version around here. I mean, that's everybody's personal preference, but yeah. And this is Geoff said this is one of the only ones that was officially released by the band. It was on the August reissue in 2007. And it's the stark contrast between the officially released version and like the bootleg that everybody has is you can really hear how well produced it was by Dave Bryson. So it's a shame that it doesn't really translate over to the bootleg.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I know they wouldn't do it now because of the way that they set up the concerts, and Adam has a certain way he wants to do Omaha, right? It's almost a performance. He goes to the one side, he goes to the other side, he goes to the middle, he has the crowd singing the verse. But this, I think maybe 15, 20 years ago, it would have kind of been fun if they broke out this version of Omaha in live, since they were really
Yeah.
into alternative versions and
Yeah.
replaying songs. I think this could have been a fun one. But anyway, that's the one thought I had. Okay, let's go to Anna Begins. And I'm like, geez, August, August, August. Here we go. This is what I call, you might disagree, I call this the groovy version of Anna Begins. And it it reminds me of I guess I think I sent this to Chris, but there's I think an incredible version, cover version of Anna Begins on YouTube. It's by I guess it's a cover band. I don't think they've done anything in 10 years. It's called the YouTube channel is The Album Cover. It's what it's called. It says Anna Begins, Counting Crows cover by The Album Cover. And it's also, it's like this one. So it reminded me of it's also, and I wonder if they got the idea from this, because it's also a groovier, faster version, which I found this one to be. Yeah, okay. I don't know. I like this, and the one thing I thought of when writing this is I'm like, I like this kind of groovier version. That Anna Begins might be the only song that they have three different versions, right? They kind of have this up-tempo version, they have the album version, and then they have what they play now, which is the more guitar-heavy version of Anna Begins. So,
Yeah.
Chris.
Well, they definitely have multiple versions of Rain. They definitely have at least 3 versions of Rain King.
Oh, that's true.
I would say.
That's true.
Maybe there's some other ones I'm not thinking of, but I actually think this is the most interesting one to AB.
Yeah.
Like, listen to this. Listen to the album version, because in certain ways they are very similar. They are the same song. The song is there, except when we talk about like the space in the instruments, the space in the arrangement, it's totally different. Like, to me, this version sounds very busy,
right,
relative to like the classic version on the album. And to me, it's almost like this is like the best example of why the album works where the demos kind of wouldn't, because in a lot of ways, I feel like it's kind of what makes the song. Like, I think there's, again, Adam said something to the effect of like, we needed to let the songs breathe. And this is the song most where I feel like you can hear like the space and the breaths and the conversation that like this demo version doesn't leave the space, because there's constantly something happening. And it's not like, again, it's not, the song's not slower, it's just more open. It's not like, and I'm bad at, I'm not a musician on this, but like, it's not that the tempo is slower, it's that they have like left space for the playing of the notes in a different way. That is fascinating and different. This is the one, again, I think if you listen to one and like, what are we talking about with this, like this shift, this is the one to sort of hear the difference.
Yeah, I agree. Geoff, your thoughts?
So, Anna Begins, my favorite Counting Crows song. So I listened to this one a lot, and I definitely agree that the studio version is significantly improved for some of the reasons that Chris says. It would be interesting to know, given that these are bootlegs, we probably never will, but was it that original band of Toby Hawkins, Lydia Hawley, Dave Bryson playing on this, or was it re-recorded with the new group, the kind of super group that he put together with the rest of the band? Because I think there are two key differences in this version, beyond what Chris was saying about the busyness. One is that I think Adam's vocal performance is so much more like emotional in the studio version that was later released on August. And this is because, as you know, I've talked about this, like, particularly the end of the song is like one of my very favorite moments in all of music. So when he's singing, she's talking in her sleep, and that whole ending part of the song, it's not nearly as powerful or emotional in this version as the version that he brings out on August. It's it's more maybe almost conversational or something, whereas in that one, it's very like he's wailing from his soul. And so a big difference in his delivery of the same song, even though he's singing it the same way, the melody's the same. The emotional impact of the later version, I think, is one key difference. And again, I don't know who's playing bass on this particular song, but certainly on most of these demos is Matt Malley, who is probably right behind Charlie as the secret weapon of the band. But he talked a lot about how T-Bone kind of reined in his instincts on this album. And he was one of those guys. He said, I used to go to Guitar Center and I could sit down with a bass and like blow everybody's mind. And they'd be like, oh, you're amazing. And T-Bone said, you need to play for the song, not to like show off what a great bass player you are. And I think on here, they also took away his fretless basses, not completely, because you can hear them on some tracks on August, but the fretless bass, I don't think there's any bass on this entire demo that's not fretless. And that gives it that very slick sound. It gives it a very like unique sound that fretless bass has. And I think it's a bit overdone on the demos just because it's so prominent and prevalent. I think if anything, in addition to the guitars, the bass is the instrument that's really foregrounded in these demos.
Yeah.
That's not untrue of the Counting Crows material either. I mean, Matt Malley plays a prominent role, but I think there's a lot of kind of a bit of overplaying on these songs. And with these fretless basses too, you can see why they said, we're going to take away your fretless basses and you've got to like play half as many notes. Because it's a bit overdone here, and it does fill in those spaces a bit too much. So I love the demo here, but I agree that with Chris that there's such a contrast between the demo and the later version. Even though it's the same song, you have to kind of listen closely to realize how different it is. But I think that this is one that they massively improved in their whatever process they went through to produce August.
By the way,
I think there's
please.
an interesting point there, right, and Geoff, in the two things together, right, that Adam's vocal performance works in part because it gets more space and maybe forced him to be a little bit more bare emotionally, right? You strip back the instruments doing some of the work and you go, okay, well, what are you going to hear? You're going to hear the vocal, right? And that means the vocal takes more prominence, and that means you got to give it more, kind of, you know what I mean? You kind of got to foreground that in a different way. And so there's a sense that all plays together, right? That leaving the space is in a lot of ways leaving space for Adam, and that he fills with, spectacular, greatest of all time rock and roll singing.
Right. And it's got to, because of that, as you say, Chris, it then has to stand alone as its own kind of performance in some ways. It's much more, there's a bigger platform and a bigger spotlight on that vocal. I mean, I think it's very clear that whatever happened between the time they recorded these demos and August was finished, he just really became a much better singer and came into his own and became the incredible singer that he is. You really do, or I really do hear that when I listen to these. Not that he wasn't already good and didn't have good instincts, but his delivery, his emotions, his performance between the demo and August, it really is. He really stepped up quite a bit.
Geoff, because we did not have you on our first album review, our second episode of August and everything after, sorry we weren't friends with you then. Right. And plus we couldn't plug your book because I think
it wasn't out yet. Right.
Yeah, it wasn't out yet. But what, just very quick, what do you, as someone who loves Anna Begins, do you, I love the album version and I love their modern version that they play in concerts. How do you feel about the concert version or the more permanent version?
Well, I've said this before. I think that the live versions they did in the first several years of playing live are the best ones. When Adam takes it up, he goes up on those notes at the end instead of holding it flat. I talked about this on the show before. And so like the version in Paris that was released, that concert in Paris from 94, that's a good example of the kind of version that I like. He doesn't do that anymore because I think he doesn't have that high range. But his delivery of the song, I think in the first few years of them playing live, I can listen to every single version of that and enjoy each one because of how he delivers it.
Okay, great. Double G, your thoughts on Anna Begins demo version?
Yeah, I can't really. I mean, those two guys, Chris and Geoff, you guys really nailed it. I mean, the only other thought I could really have, other than, I mean, I feel like this is the inferior version of the two tracks, side by side. The only other thing I could think of is I wonder also if the stress of making August, because I think you said it earlier, they bang these demos out relatively quickly, and then they sit down with T-Bone and they are trying to make this album. I wonder if the stress of recording these songs there also adds to the emotion in his voice. Like I wonder if that's also a factor. But you guys really knocked it out of the park.
Thank you. Okay, great. So now we're going to go to the first song that's not on August, and one of their most famous songs, popular songs he will never play live, song he wish never was released, Einstein on the Beach. Famously, because of this demo tape. See, that's what I didn't know back then. And I played Einstein on the Beach regularly on my college radio station because I think it was released when I had a radio show. And I just thought it was like a side single for them while they worked on their second album or whatever. But no, it was from this original demo tape, and it's super catchy. And they released it. And in fact, the first fan mail, Chris, that we got from Sullivan Street, a Counting Crows podcast, or for our podcast, was about, tell me more about Einstein on the Beach. So now we are, episode 45. So we are going to address this now and why he doesn't play it live, etc. So, but yeah, he never intended. And so I was listening, because I was talking to Geoff and Chris yesterday, I re-listened to Kyle Meredith, who was on our podcast, of course, interview of Adam just last year, which is one of the only interviews with Adam, I think, from the last 10 years where the interviewer is allowed to get some into deep dives, even though it's about promoting their current album. I kind of think Bob Saget did it a little bit too. I'd have to find that before he passed away, because it ends up he knew of some of these demos and he was asking about Matt Malley and things like that. But Adam said on Kyle Meredith, so he really liked Kyle Meredith's analogy comparing Einstein to Accidentally in Love.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's like, hey, they're poppy songs, they're not so deep, etc. And then he kind of said, why do you like playing Accidentally but not Einstein? And he didn't directly answer it, but he did say, well, Accidentally meant more to me, because I really wanted to be on an animated, and Shrek was a classic. He also said that he said that both were kind of cute, clever songs more than deep songs. Oh, first of all, he did say, I don't play Accidentally in Love that much, which is true. I think it's been 50 times. I think I looked it up yesterday, 53 in whatever that is, 20 plus years.
And I would argue probably 75% of those were within a year of playing. Like, I bet they've played it, I don't know, 25, 30 times. It's the kind of thing they play like once or twice a year. And sometimes they go years without doing it,
Yeah, I looked at even in the rankings, I was like, oh, he's played Meat on the Ledge 4 times more than Accidentally in Love or the Fairport Convention or whatever that is. So, but he did also say, he goes, well, the lyrics, they mean a little more to me because of the philosophy of what it means to be in love, and it's kind of fleeting and playful, blah, 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 where he thought Einstein was just a little clever idea he had. He said he thinks that they only played it once live. Setlist says they played it twice live. He said when we did play it live,
one of those setlist things, though, because someone was asking about this recently, and I looked at that. Whatever the thing, the second time it says on setlist.fm is clearly it's not a setlist. It's like weird, and it does not look correct to me.
Okay,
the hilarious thing about this song is that there are people who will say that they've seen it, and that is impossible.
Impossible, yeah.
So
maybe
it's hilarious to me. People this is one of those weird things with memory. People are like, "Oh yeah, I saw them play Einstein on the Beach a couple times," and it's like, "No, you didn't. I guarantee you didn't."
And he, so maybe you're right. Maybe they only played it, or maybe he's right. They only played it once, and he said they did an awful job when they did play it once. That they were either had just recorded it or were about to record it. The only other thing I want to say, I like this song a lot. It does remind me of Accidentally in Love. This is one where Charlie shines a bit. Charlie's playing on the organ, and even it ends with that classic, like in a more than a handful of songs, it kind of ends with Charlie's organ doing. I think he does it in this one. I find that his vocal performance is very good here too. Adams. There's some of the high notes and stuff. I thought in some ways this is, separate from the song. which I don't think is the best song on the demos, but I think his performance might be, especially given the fast pace. Chris, let's go to your thoughts on Einstein on the Beach.
I mean, I kind of think Adam's right, that like this is not, I mean, it's a really interesting song. It's like a good pop song. It doesn't seem to have much to do with what I love about Counting Crows. So yeah, I'm kind of with them. Like I don't understand contextually where this. It'd be interesting to hear them play it, just out of sheer curiosity. That anything they haven't played in a while is sort of interesting for us to hear them play. But yeah, I'm with it. It's like not. I guess I'm with Adam on it. I'm not desperate for them to see them bust this out. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a good pop song. You know what I mean? It's
yep.
And I'm with you though. The vocals are great. Like maybe that's part of it and why it maybe popped in a way. The vocals are great, I think, and particularly to Jeff's point, like relative to maybe some of the rest of these songs, Adam's performance is really strong vocally on this.
Good point.
Geoff, your thoughts on Einstein?
Yeah, so this was, I mean, I remember when this song came out too, and you know, I mean, at this point in the August cycle, when they were, this was would have been like the summer of 1994, so they had two huge hits with Mr. Jones and Round Here. Everybody had teed up Rain King to be the next thing. Adam refused to do a video for Rain King. Geffen released it as a single anyway, but he didn't do a video. He said, "I'm not going to do it." Instead, they released this, and it topped the alternate, like the modern rock charts. Basically, it went to number one, the biggest, or certainly one of the biggest hits that the band ever had during this time. Which was,
and it's on their. We forgot to say it's on their greatest hits, even though it was never released.
Yeah,
that's the only official release is on the greatest hits. So,
it was officially released on DGC.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so it was very kind of frustrating to Adam that he wanted to back off, and instead this song, he said it blew everything else up too. Suddenly they're playing, Rain King and everything else. It was, some ways it worked against what he wanted to do. He said, I probably should have just done Rain King instead of this, because it would have had less of an impact. The one thing I'll say is that Adam has said many times that this song was basically a clever idea, but he didn't think that it was a great song. So the clever idea is that a genius mathematician invents this brilliant thing, the atomic bomb, and it works against him, so it kind of literally blows up in his face and becomes this horrible thing that's used to kill millions of people. So I'm not getting that in the lyrics. I'm sorry. Every time I listen to this song, I'm like, I know what Adam said it's about, but when I read the lyrics, that does not seem to be what it's about. I know Einstein's name is in here. The title, Einstein on the Beach, comes from a Philip Glass song. For an Eggman, and there's a lot of stuff about the Eggman and falling off the wall. Well, that's from I Am the Walrus. This whole thing about atomic bombs and the mathematician who invented this thing, and it goes against what... I just don't get that in any of the lyrics. I'm sorry. So I do think it's a catchy and fun song, but in some ways you have to respect the fact that Adam knew enough not to become the Spin Doctors and have songs like this and, become the thing that they did and the thing that they were known for, because it is catchy. It is a hit. And the fact that he didn't, say, all right, well, we're going to jump all over this. You have to kind of respect the fact that they understood that things could have went very differently for them if they had just become this kind of poppy, catchy band. And like I said, think of the Spin Doctors, who were around at the same time, who had a bunch of poppy, catchy songs like this. And where are they today? Playing third on the bill at a casino or something like that, if they're lucky. And so I do respect the fact that Adam didn't pursue this and play it at every concert.
Yeah, and to your point, I guess I don't want to beat some to death, but you make a good point too. And think about their last, I guess, mainstream hits, where it was the Big Yellow Taxi and Accidentally in Love. I guess that you'd hear them on regular top 40 radio, right? Not just on that. It kind of, those songs, to people that were only paying attention to them peripherally, right, to the side, it kind of happened, Geoff. Some of those people to this day think of Counting Crows as like a Spin Doctory type of group because of that. So like what you're saying, Adam was kind of prescient thinking, I don't want that.
Yeah.
Right, because that kind of came true. Yeah, there's some people I mentioned Counting Crows, and they're like, "Oh, right, Big Yellow Taxi and the Shrek song or something."
Yeah.
That's not really why I love them, but okay. Double G, going to you.
Yeah, I'm glad Chris said what he said about the arguments people get on. There was the argument the other day on, well, it was on Facebook or something. People were arguing about seeing Einstein. I'm like, you haven't. All you got to do is look up the set list. They played it once in, I think, 1991, like we were saying, and that's it. Adam doesn't like the song, and it's not my favorite either. So
It was legitimately one of the funniest things. Like, oh yeah, it was like Milwaukee in like 06, and it's like, I think like that would have broken Counting Crows message boards, which I have been on steadily for like 20 plus. Like we would know.
it's like when they played August and Everything After Live for the first time, and it was chaos. It would have been the same thing. You're right.
Exactly. Everyone was dying for that tape. So it was like, oh yeah, they played that. You're like, yeah, like we all literally freaked out and talked about nothing until a tape appeared, and then we talked about the tape. Like that was, like.
And nobody ever heard the demo of that song that was given to Adam, but as soon as he went out and played the live version, it was just because nobody believed the story, on the message board. So,
Geoff, thanks for and actually all of you do this all the time, but thank you for bringing up things that are either in my subconscious or that I thought one point, because literally, Geoff, on the ride home yesterday, I guess I was listening to this again, right, to prepare myself. So I listened to the first half of Flying Demos, and I thought the exact same thing, because I remember him talking about the clever idea about the atom bomb, et cetera, and it reminded me about the AI, right? Because maybe since atom bomb, that the new there, I don't think there's ever been a technology since the bomb until AI where they're like, this new technology might cause the death of civilization, right? Whether it does or not. But I remember thinking, I was like, I didn't get any of that from the song. Like, I know the title's about that, but I almost thought the title was about this, but the song's about something else. I don't know. Whatever. Okay. Let's move to track 5, Shallow Days. So this is the first song on the Flying Demos, and then maybe 8 of the next 9 that were not on August and not released as a single, right, from Geffen. So this is kind of the first new song if you were just listening to Flying Demos for the first time. Although Shallow Days was one of, I guess it's 3 of them, right, that were released as far as with the August reissue. So Shallow Days on the reissue, they have an acoustic version of it, and the I guess this version of it, right? Those are the 2.
Yep.
Something like that. So I don't. So in about half of these songs that were unreleased before, a lot of them I know. Okay, so I am someone, and I'm glad Kyle Meredith asked about this. I am someone who want them to re-record all of these. Right, I want them to make a Shallow Days new version. I want them to make a 40 Years. I want them to do Marjorie, maybe reimagine it, maybe fix it up, tighten it up a little bit. Probably will never happen. But what's interesting is that when I was going through these, half of these songs, I think, do have the skeletons of songs that were released later. And maybe to me it's a stretch, but I do. These are just what I saw. So in this case, I don't know. I don't know what my thoughts. I don't know if he's ever talked about why he uses the term Mary Jane. If it is a double meaning or whatever, or it's just a name of, because we're women called Mary Jane. It's clearly a bit of a funky song. According to the set list, was never played live. So I like all of these songs. So the song that I actually heard a bit of here was New Frontier, and kind of the funk in this. And I actually think if they would have taken this skeleton and added some synth and redid it during the Hard Candy, might have been a superior version of New Frontier. I like New Frontier. I know Geoff doesn't like it as much, but yeah. So yeah, here you go.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because New Frontier, right, has like the Mind the Gap and sort of the British references. I mean, this to me kind of sounds like a Blue Nile song. Like it sounds like it has that sort of British synthy thing from the 80s. I like the tune. I'm not like, again, this is not one where I'm like, oh my God, they've got to go back with it. But I think it's an interesting tune. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have It's not one where I like the outro quite a bit on it. I know, but I don't know. I don't feel too strongly about this one.
All right, Geoff, any thoughts on Shallow-Days?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely liked the song a lot, and Adam has said that they tried and tried and tried to get this song right, and he liked it a lot, but they could not get it to kind of work. He always said it was a 2.5 minute song that took 5 minutes to get through, and that they couldn't seem to tighten it up in a way that kind of worked. But he said that they did work on this one a lot, and that he really loved the verses a lot, and he liked the melody a lot, and they couldn't quite get it to click or to work. It is kind of surprising that he never went back to it. For all the songs that they have gone back to, whether it's 1492 or Sundays or songs that were eventually revisited, it's interesting that he never came back to this one, at least in a way that was satisfactory to them. And obviously they liked it so much they put out 2 versions of it on the August reissue. So they were, where you kind of get the like across a wire vibe from it. 2 different kind of iterations that it could have taken. But ultimately, I guess the one thing I would say is it does seem a little bit, and maybe this is why they didn't include it, but it does seem a little like sing-songy and just a little maybe too catchy for its own good or something. And clearly Adam, he's said many times he doesn't like these songs that were not released. He's not a fan of them. And if they like the songs that they released them. And so you can kind of see as they moved into stuff like Perfect Blue Buildings on August, and he was writing these songs that were much more melancholy and much more spacious, that you can see he kind of wanted to get away from some of the things like Einstein on the Beach and this song that were just maybe a little too catchy for their own good.